Hey, I'm Cliffhanger, and this is the movie Nosferatu. A young lawyer sets out for an ancient mansion to sell a new house to the Count who lives there. However, the buyer turns out to be an ancient monster hunting for the lawyer's wife. The action of the film begins in the first half of the 10th century. Young Ellen prays at night for a guardian angel to come and save her from loneliness and despair. The call is answered by a certain dark shadow, calling the girl outside in a foreign tongue. After a walk under the moon, Ellen falls into a trance, sees a terrifying creature, and she starts convulsing. Not in a tango rhythm, but in an epileptic fit. Several years later, it is now 1838. Ellen lives in the German town of Viborg together with a cat and her husband. It is not clear who is actually the boss in the family hierarchy. Her husband, Thomas Hutter, works as a real estate agent in the office of Mr. Knock. The employer promises a promotion if Thomas can handle an important assignment. Go to Bohemia, not to listen to rhapsodies but to close a property deal with the local aristocrat, Count Orlok. Ellen dreams bad dreams about the trip, in which her husband appears somewhat dead already. However, he is forced to take the assignment anyway. To calm Ellen, Thomas sends her to stay with friends, shipowner Friedrich Harding and his wife Anna, who are raising twin daughters and expecting a third child. At night, a worried Ellen cuts off a lock of her hair. Thomas's boss, Mr. Knock, indulges in occult rituals and indecent nakedness. The next day, Ellen, seeing her husband off, gives him as a keepsake a medallion with her hair inside. Then Thomas mounts his horse and rides off toward his new assignment. Arriving in Bohemia, he settles at an inn where the local gypsies for some reason mock him until the owner appears. The guest barely manages to rent a bed in this gloomy, inhospitable house. In the evening, Thomas watches from the window a caravan of gypsies with a naked girl on horseback heading toward the cemetery. There they dig up a grave to extract a coffin and, prying the lid, pierce the corpse with a metal stake. Thomas is shocked, suddenly awakening in his bed. Only the dirt on his feet shows he really wandered through the cemetery at night. In the morning, discovering that the residents have disappeared along with his horse, Thomas sets off on foot into the mountains toward Count Orlok's castle. When night falls, he meets on the alley a moving carriage with no driver, which almost runs him over. The carriage magically turns across the road as if inviting him, and Thomas is carried off toward the Count's estate along picturesque landscapes accompanied by a pack of wolves. Soon he arrives at the gates of the castle, where a mysterious figure meets him and leads him upstairs. Inside the castle, the guest finally meets the enigmatic and frightening master, Count Orlok. Thomas shows the documents, which seem to teleport across the dining hall. The Count carefully examines them while offering the visitor food. During dinner, the guest accidentally cuts his hand with a knife, which provokes undisguised interest from the Count. He says he will heal Thomas's wound, approaching in a menacing manner. Losing consciousness, Thomas comes to only in the morning, lying on the dining room floor. Wandering through the empty castle, Thomas finds a mirror and notices strange marks on his chest, as if from the bite of a wild animal. When night falls again, the Count prepares to sign the agreement. For the deal to be complete, Thomas's signature is needed, but he hesitates because the document is written in an unfamiliar language. Orlok notices Ellen's medallion and asks to inspect it. Forgetting to return it, the Count insists on Thomas signing, promising him a small pouch of gold in reward. Wanting to finish quickly, the guest signs the papers and asks to leave because of feeling unwell, but the host insists he stay until he is better. Waking the next morning, Thomas sees that the wounds on his chest have not healed, but instead have opened wider. Realizing something is wrong, he tries to escape from the castle, but the gates are locked. Exploring the location, he descends into the basement where he finds an ornate carved coffin for the most stylish of the dead. Examining the occult signs, the man lifts the lid. Inside rests the Count. Grabbing a pickaxe, Thomas plans to make the vampire's end, but Orlok suddenly wakes up, sniffing Ellen's medallion, then lunges at the guest, casting a sinister shadow and bending him to his will. Back in Viborg, Ellen also comes under the dark influence of the Count. Wandering in a trance, she walks out of the house at night. Later, she is examined by Dr. Wilhelm Sievers, who attributes her somnambulism to mental anxiety and gives her laudanum, an opium tincture. When he wakes the next morning, Thomas sees that guard dogs now surround him. He escapes through the window of his room, making a leap of faith, not into a haystack, but into the waters of the river flowing below. Back in Wyborg, Ellen sinks into melancholy, fearing something has happened to her husband. The Hardings, who have taken her in, witness one of her epileptic seizures. Dr. Sievers is informed about a new patient, someone who killed several sheep with his bare hands and devoured the raw meat. This boarder of the Yellow House turns out to be none other than Mr. Nock, Thomas's employer, who has already submitted himself to Count Orlok. Sitting far from decent society, Nock speaks of the coming of his master. He even tries to bite the doctor until a blow from a truncheon calms him down. Later, observing yet another seizure in Ellen, Dr. Sievers admits to Friedrich Harding that he cannot find a cure for her affliction. But there is good news. His mentor and teacher, Professor Alban Eberhard von Franz, a man very skilled in these matters, though considered slightly unhinged by colleagues for explaining illness in occult terms, is visiting the city. Thomas is fished out of the river by nuns of an Orthodox monastery. They revive him and persuade him to stay in the holy walls where evil in the flesh cannot reach him. But Thomas realizes he must return home. Meanwhile, the Infernal Count, having taken Ellen's medallion for her scent, is already traveling there by ship. The ship's crew begins to suffer misfortunes and die under mysterious circumstances. At night, one sailor with an axe descends into the hold to confront the root of their troubles. Opening the lid, he finds no menacing vampire but hundreds of plague rats, while the Count lurks at the side to attack. Soon the ship is deserted. Professor von Franz visits the Hardings and immediately declares that the root of Ellen's illness lies beyond the limits of medicine. It is a symptom of the manifestation of true evil. To investigate the girl, he asks her to describe her visions, and that night, when she again falls into a trance, he tests her. Piercing her hand with a needle, she does not react to pain, and when von Franz recites a prayer to drive out the evil spirit, Count Orlok himself speaks through Ellen. The professor theorizes that they are dealing with a powerful mythical being, the Nosferatu, a legend that appears in many cultures around the world. Meanwhile, at the asylum, Nock has another seizure. When the attendants loosen his bindings to examine him, he attacks a guard and escapes. That night, Ellen, sensing something approaching, runs into the street where she encounters the exhausted Thomas. Soon, Friedrich is summoned by the authorities. One of his ships has wrecked on the shore. Among its splintered timbers are hundreds of plague rats, but no sign of the coffin once transported aboard. Faithful Nock has already taken the box to a specially prepared mansion to serve as a refuge. By morning, the town is overrun with rats from the wrecked ship, spreading pestilence everywhere. Professor von Franz examines the body of a dead sailor. Despite plague-like symptoms, it is completely drained of blood. Ellen is barely holding herself together and tending to Thomas, who has been bitten by the vampire. Seeing her husband recoil from her touch, frightened Ellen asks Anna to stay with her after putting the children to bed, just to keep her company until the fear passes. But as soon as they doze off, the girl envisions the arrival of Count Orlok himself. The vampire tells her that her plea years ago awakened him and bound them by unbreakable ties. He has come to the city to claim her, after first tricking Thomas into signing a dissolution of marriage for a handful of coins. Now, he needs Ellen's voluntary consent to become his concubine. Ellen realizes the vampire deceived her husband and refuses to submit. Then the Count switches to alternative methods of persuasion, threatening to take those she loves one by one over the next few nights until she yields completely. Orlok vanishes, and Ellen wakes up in bed. She sees Anna no longer beside her. The woman lies on the floor being devoured by plague rats. In the morning, Ellen tries to explain to Friedrich that the cause of what happened to his wife was a monstrous being, but he does not believe her. Together with her sick husband, she is forced to leave the Hardings' house. They make their way through corpse-strewn streets where the rats roam freely, spreading the disease. Meanwhile, Professor von Franz and Dr. Sievers search Nock's abandoned house. They find a book of occult rituals and traces of ceremonies performed there. They return to Friedrich only to discover that the host has driven Ellen and Thomas away. That evening, the spouses argue. When Thomas feels a little better, Ellen confesses to her long-ago link with the mysterious Count, whom she summoned in a moment of despair, and accuses Thomas of never writing to her. Nerves snap, and Ellen has another seizure before falling into a trance, then wakes from it in a burst of frantic intimacy with her husband. But in the midst of their passion, the Count interferes telepathically, provoking yet another fit in Ellen. The insulted vampire, enraged by such betrayal, heads out to fulfill his earlier threat. Count Orlok sneaks into the Harding's house, where the brave Friedrich sleeps clutching a pistol. But weapons are useless against the mighty vampire. The man does not even wake as his wife senses danger. Anna runs to the children's room, where the Count has already drained the blood of the twin daughters and now turns to her. By morning, Anna and the daughters are buried. The inconsolable Friedrich sees Ellen with Professor von Franz and, in hysteria, tries to drive her away, blaming her for what happened. Thomas and Dr. Sievers manage to calm him. The whole group travels by carriage back into town, discussing a plan to hunt Orlok. The professor explains that in all legends about Nosferatu, there is one constant. The vampire must return to the earth where he was buried before sunrise. If they find the lair where that earth is kept and expose it to daylight, they can destroy him. Having studied Nock's book the previous night, von Franz realizes that only a voluntary sacrifice of the maiden, desired by the vampire, can truly end him. Gathering their courage, the men set off to find the coffin, all except grief-stricken Friedrich. Friedrich goes to the crypt where he has buried his wife and children. Sick with plague symptoms, he takes his wife's body from the coffin to indulge in a final act of forbidden closeness. It is there Thomas and his companions find him dead. They burn the bodies to prevent the spread of the curse. The trio of vampire hunters, having lost their comrade, moves toward the mansion previously purchased by Nock. Spotting a coffin, Thomas opens the lid and drives a stake into the body inside. But it turns out not to be the Count at all, only his loyal servant Nock. Meanwhile, the real Count Orlok is heading toward Ellen, who is waiting for him, according to von Franz's plan. Realizing the trap, Thomas runs across the entire town back to his wife, while his colleagues burn the coffin. Ellen, dressed in a bridal gown, waits for the Count. He comes to her and gives himself over to shameful passion, draining the life force along with the blood from her body. The process takes so long, it stretches into sunrise. As the first rays enter the windows, Ellen embraces the rotting body of the Count, holding him in place until his inevitable destruction. Thomas bursts in to find his wife dead in bed, locked in a final embrace with the shriveled corpse. Professor von Franz scatters flowers on the bed, reminding Thomas that with her sacrifice, Ellen has saved them all from the terrible supernatural evil threatening irreversible ruin to the town. On this tragic note, the film ends. If you want to see more videos like this, leave a like and subscribe. That helps my channel a lot. See you.